Hi, I'm Carly of gnarlycarleygaming, and welcome back couchside as I geek out over games. Today I'm going to be talking about something that is kind of rare for my table and my channel, which is a game that is largely card-based. And the reason for that is a lot of games either feel like rip-off Magic, baby Magic that just doesn't have enough intrigue, or oh no, not another deck builder or player elimination battling card game. They just often can feel very samey to me, and there's nothing about that that screams, oh, please try me and get me to the table. So when asked to cover a game like this, I almost always say no. I can only play so many games, and giving my time to card game after card game could consume my entire existence and not really give me anything novel back. But I didn't say no to covering Etherstone, which I will talk about today, when Thundergryph Games asked me to try it. They provided the game, they provided compensation to try it, but before I ever took it on, what I do with any of the games that I'm offered is I go through the rulebook and I figure out if it's right for me. And so I did so more so because I've liked some of the other games they produced and to see what this one is. But when I started to peep the rulebook and saw the heavy card element, I almost certainly was like, this will be a no. But I went through it and a couple of facets of it intrigued me in terms of the depth that it could potentially provide. And so I ended up saying yes. And today I'm going to talk about what this game is and why it's a card game that I think grows well in a collection. This right here is Etherstone, and in the game you play a leader with your own asymmetric ability and your health value that's counted on a little counter, and you'll gather Etherstones and basically spend them to summon, which is just playing cards in order to gain new kind of allies and new abilities and try to ultimately win. And so my first thought was, oh no, this is Commander Magic. But it's not, because you're not just trying to knock out other players and fight them. There will be fighting, but not against other players. What you are trying to do ultimately is score the most points, be the best leader. Players will begin the game with a leader, and their leader will determine their starting health and some of these Etherstones, which are resources that you spend in the game to start off with, as well as a hand of 7 cards. And these cards will either be curated by the game in sets specific to leaders, or you can draft cards amongst players, which they recommend once you're familiar with the game. Then players rotate turns until the game concludes. And on a turn, each player will get to take one action and trigger abilities that they may have as appropriate. Their actions are one of 4 major things. The first of which is the gathering of your Etherstones, gathering of your resources that you'll need to buy cards later. With this, I think this is a fun and dynamic way of gathering resources, rather than just taking a turn a la Splendor, where it's either grab 2 of the same kind of stone or 3 different ones. Players actually have to draft from dice available to them, and this determines the color stone that they get. So there's 5 different colored dice. All of them have corresponding Etherstone colors except the purple die, and that one's a wild one. But if you take from wild, it will allow you to take whatever color you'd like. However, you're going to lose health in the process of doing so. So get a little, but lose a little to have that flexibility. But any other die that you take, its number won't be relevant for the resources you gather, but you'll get 2 of the corresponding Etherstone. The second action you can do, so when it rotates back to your turn, you could gather, and then maybe the next turn you could summon. Summon is how this game defines basically buying a card from your hand, one of the 7 that you start with. You'll spend the Etherstones required of the card and get to play it in front of you. These all have various abilities. Some of them have instant effects or endgame scoring bonuses, and some of the cards are called follower cards, and they're going to essentially be allies in battle for you, in addition to other abilities that they sometimes give. So needing certain Etherstones for these guys will trigger which dice you ultimately want to take. But as soon as someone takes a die, it leaves the display, and all dice are only re-rolled and added back to the display when they're all exhausted at the start of someone's turn. That being said, it can be frustrating if you're like, all I need is a black Etherstone and the black die's gone and the purple guy's gone and I can't really do anything with my cards until then. In which case, however many dice are remaining in the pool, you can spend health equal to that value in order to re-roll all of the die and add them back to the display. So you're never down and out. No one can keep you away from the Etherstones you desperately need, but you have to manage life kind of as a resource as well in this game. Because if your total ever hits 0, not only will you have to spend a whole turn kind of not taking an action, just resetting your health to maximum, but you'll also get a void pact. And a void pact is essentially -7 points in the game, which is not knocking you out of the game. And I like that there's no player elimination in this game, but it is a huge setback in terms of winning. It is not a small figure, and so you either want the rest of the table to also be getting void pact tokens or to really, really avoid it in the game. So taking the void dice, the purple die that is wild, or choosing to re-roll the dice can knock your health down a little bit. But what really can knock you back quite a bunch is the third action and one of the core actions of the game, which is attacking. There will at all times be 3 threats available in the center of the table, and players can choose on their turn to fight one of these threats. Should you beat one of these threats, you'll get their bonus at the bottom of their card, but you'll also, and crucially, get the victory points at the end of the game printed on the top corner of them. Thus, this is a big mechanism in this game, is building up to fight them. These threats start off fairly easy to tackle at level 1 and make their way all the way up to level 3 baddies. Each time you start a game, you'll assemble a new random deck with different bad guys in it, so you won't always know what's coming up and the kickbacks that are going to be available to you. Attacking in this game, to my delight, is not random. We're not rolling dice. We're not doing anything like that. You'll always know if you can beat a threat, and you will take the action to attack when you can beat the threat. And beating the threat is just going to have basically a strength value printed on the bottom of your leader or any of your follower cards equal to or greater than the threat that you're trying to tackle. Your leader can always participate, but any allies involved will be exhausted when they are participated. You'll tap them, akin to Magic or other games, and then you'll have to refresh them in order to be able to use them again. But if I have 5 strength and my ally has 3 and we're tackling something that's 7, that's enough. I can tap the ally, use myself, and defeat the bad guy, getting the bonus as well as any points or other things associated with that card. But the baddies in this game bite back, and when you defeat a threat, it's going to hit you with its strength value, but only if your leader is in play. If you somehow have enough strength from all of your allies to defeat it without getting your leader's strength involved, then you're in the clear. But otherwise, it'll deal whatever its strength is in damage to your leader's health. This is one of the bigger ways in the game that your health dial can become a little testy. And so getting a void pact, like I said, isn't the be-all end-all, but you want to manage how many times you get knocked below 0 versus the other people at the table in the process of trying to secure these points. Because it's great to get 4 points, it's less great if it loses me 7. So follower management, those cards that can help you in battle, becomes a bigger part of this game as the game goes on and the threats get harder. So the last action of the game, the 4th one that you can do, is called Rest, and that's taking a whole action just to refresh any of your exhausted followers. So that's pretty much the entire game. It's quite simple, really. You use that dynamic dice draft in order to collect Etherstones. You'll use your Etherstones to summon the cards out of your hands. This will give you new abilities, new pathways to points at endgame or in-game, and it'll give you followers, which will help you fight threats that come your way. You'll manage your health and really just try to carve out the most points while the game's going on. So the game will come to a close when one of 3 things happen. Either there'll be no more threats to draw from the threat deck, which will end the game. Someone will play their 7th card out of their hand, so no more cards to play. That can end the game. And lastly, there's always a set number of victory point tokens set aside in the beginning of the game based on player count. If all of those are exhausted by in-game points, then that will also trigger endgame. There'll be an extra reserve of points so you can keep tallying them up, but those are the 3 ways that the game can end. Whoever triggers endgame will get 2 points, and the rest of endgame points are pretty much the points on your threat cards, the points on your summoned cards, as well as any points on your cards that are conditional endgame objectives. Lastly, players will get 1 victory point for every 2 health they manage to hold on to at endgame, but will also lose those -7 points for each of the Void Pack tokens they endured. So that is Etherstone in a nutshell, and as you've heard, it is a very, very simple game. I don't think this will be hard for many folks to wrap their head around, whether they're deeply entrenched in the hobby or new to modern gaming. I think this is an incredibly approachable game. And so I guess when I think about the genre of very approachable games, a lot of what I'm thinking about lately is endurance in my collection. I, for a long time, as I got more and more into the hobby, had what ended up being kind of a rotating carousel of lighter games in my world. And a lot of them I would exhaust from and move on from. And so it was just about when they found me. Some puzzles just aren't deep enough to hold on to for a very long time, because you play them and learn them and they're familiar and they can be comforting and you hold on to some old favorites, but they don't stand out amongst a crowd of other light games. It's really hard for a light game, for a card game, to wow. So what I look for when I want something light is something that will endure and grow with me. And I think this game, what I liked about it, what drew me into it and made me want to give it a chance when I read the rulebook, and what felt good at the table, is how it can grow with a player. And largely that comes down to the cards. Yes, there's asymmetric leaders and a whole bunch of different ability cards that they start with, but what works really well for me in this is the card draft element that players can level up into. The 7 cards you have in this game are crucial. One of the major ways the game ends is when someone gets all of their cards. And you want your cards to give you a boost along the way. You want them to make it easier to fight threats. You want them to give you new ways to score points, to keep your opponents on their toes, or else to help you finish other cards quickly so that you can end the game that way with ideally the most points. You also want cards that have good point values. All of these things would make it really hard for a new player to draft cards, because they're the core of your game and what you pick matters so, so much. So having those curated starter sets makes this approachable at first brush, because otherwise drafting would take way too long. And you can rotate through those curated sets. There's a bunch of different leaders, and you can pick a different set as you grow and want to learn a different style. You could stick with the same leader if you want to just try a different pathway with them. There's a lot of learning and growing you can do before you ever get to that draft. But if you like the flow of the game, the draft adds such a dynamic element, not only in terms of variability. A lot of times in games we talk about how variable game to game things can be, how much it can shake it up, but also what it offers is new mental puzzles for you to dive into. The idea being that you'll get familiar with these cards and how they can play off of each other, and a draft will allow you to think through new ways to weave them together in sets that haven't existed before, or in sets that you might just have to work with as you carve out new strategies in a landscape that the game doesn't hand you. This uncertainty means less tried and true strategies and going down the same trodden path, but instead asks players to rethink ways to explore and engage with this game. So for me, what was fun with this game is as it got familiar, I got to take that next step and have it expand and explode with new potential and opportunity and strategy and ways to play. That also, of course, means that if you have new gamers, you can keep it very simple. And if you have experienced gamers, maybe after a play or two, you can go into that draft variant to level it up for everybody. But it makes this game endure for me because games keep feeling different. And also it can grow and shrink with me as a gamer and with the rest of the people at my table in a way that means that I can get this to the table more. I have very few card games that live on my shelf for a long time and that I often long to play because quite simply, most of them can get quite stale. And I think why this one hits for me is how fresh it keeps itself in how dynamically these cards build together. I'm not sure if you watching this have played games like Smash Up, for instance, which is a very different kind of card game. But in it, they try to tackle that staleness by basically the cards deck that you're playing with is smashed between two factions. So you could be like zombies and pirates, two different decks, smash them together. This makes new combos and keeps a player having a new experience, but often can feel clunky and not quite right and how it all fits together. And I think the draft in this game is so simple and smooth. It's only 7 cards at the core of the game, too. So it's not making this behemoth deck, but doing a very careful and curated draft where you have to plan a little bit, but also work with what you've got. And I really like how smoothly you can build something out of whatever is handed to you. So to sum up, this game is a simple enough card game that my brother, who doesn't want to hear his little sister talk for more than 5 minutes, could sit through it and play with me. But it is deep enough in how it can shake up player experience that I think it's enjoyable to play and will endure quite well in most collections. And so if you're a card game kid or want to try to find a card game that might speak to you too, I recommend checking it out. I do have a link in the description below, but let me know if you have any questions about this game or other card games or my philosophies on enduring games in your collection and how I assess what endurability looks like and means. But otherwise, that is it for me today. This is my preview of Etherstone and my experience with it and what delights me about it as the simple card game that it is. Go ahead and check out the campaign if you're interested, but otherwise, I will see you all for the next video.